Welcome to Game to Movie, where we talk about how to turn a game, usually a computer game, sometimes trading card game, sometimes board game, into a movie, obviously, but sometimes TV show, maybe theatre show, who knows. Today's game is...
Do you have any idea what Blood Bowl is? Moving! Get it? Dodging! Passing! Protecting the ball carrier and crushing the hell out of your opponents!
Blood Bowl is a tabletop game and spin-off from the Warhammer Old World War game, sort of. It doesn't take place within the same universe as the Warhammer, the main setting. Not the Age of Sigmar. This is going back to the Old World. And it's sort of in a parallel universe. You've got your Warhammer universe where, Karl Franz and Telkis and Archon and Nagash are all doing what they love to do best, which is war. And then some point, it splits off into a parallel timeline where things are kind of the same, but there's a big difference, okay? But it's still produced by Games Workshop. It's still the same universe with the same sort of fantasy creatures and abilities. The Warhammer universe fantasy world is a sort of standard fantasy setting where orcs, elves, dwarfs, undead, humans, ogres, demons, etc. usually fight each other with medieval magic and tech, sometimes with steampunk inspirations. It's like if Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings during a heavy metal phase. Now, some genius called Jervis Johnson at Games Workshop had the idea to use these fantasy creatures for the basis of teams in a parody of American football and some rugby thrown in. The game is a two-player turn-based board game played on a tabletop with miniatures that you would recognise from the Warhammer game. You create a team of fantasy creatures with unique gameplay and skills appropriate for their fantasy origins and play a game of American football utilising dice. Unlike American football, injuries are far more deadly and tolerated, like a, OTT version of hockey.
Now that wasn't very nice.
And the skills the players have are much more diverse, such as trolls being able to throw goblins over the touchline.
Thank you for making me a part of this.
Troll-slaying dwarfs, who are a bit mad, fringing some characters, and the undead regenerating if killed. It's a popular game for its variety of gameplay styles. The first computer game version of Blood Bowl was released in 1995, an MS-DOS version by Strategic Simulations. More versions followed, and Blood Bowl 3 was released in 2023. So other than producing an excellent sporting drama, why produce a film based on Blood Bowl? To answer that question, I need to talk about how the lore of Blood Bowl explains its place within the Warhammer universe itself. The Blood Bowl is what caused the schism into a parallel universe. You see, the Warhammer universe has lizard men / dinosaurs who like to make sacrifices out of the men, elves, the dwarves and demons. There's also elves who are as posh and as violent as the British royal family. There are dwarves that make Gimli look charming, orcs that get angry when they're not fighting, dark elves who would laugh at our idea of torture, and the forces of chaos who worship four gods, and the least said about them the better. Humans are there too. However, their societies are the worst ones human history has to offer, with some honourable ideals mixed in. These races and more continually fight against each other, sometimes making alliances, and occasionally there is an apocalypse. It's not a nice fantasy world, which makes it perfect for a tabletop wargame. Blood Bowl is set in a parallel universe that has the same history as the original up until the ancient rules for a religious rite dedicated to a god called Nuffle are found, and these are sort of turned into Blood Bowl. Right before this religious rite is found, in this parallel universe, orcs and dwarves are getting ready for yet another fight. A dwarf discovered quite near the proposed battlefield a temple in which the rules for Blood Bowl were sort of inscribed on its walls. The dwarf translated the rules and discovered an arena to play the game in. The discovery attracted the attention of the whole dwarf army and then the orc army, and because many races in the Warhammer world are religious, or at least religious in the same way the Spanish Inquisition is religious, they decided to play the game to honour this new god and presumably bless their battlefield, regardless of whatever gods they already had in mind. The two sides found the game immensely entertaining, so they decided to settle the outcome of the battle on who won the game. Eventually, the game spread across the Warhammer world, and in a feat of common sense unrivaled in fantasy fiction, the races of the Warhammer world stopped their wars and instead settled differences on the Blood Bowl pitch. Even the Chaos Gods had to abandon their traditional way of warfare, the great game of conquest, in order to play the game and bless their teams and maintain their own worship. In some sense, it's as if the Christmas truce in World War I actually ended that conflict and everyone just played football in all future wars. And that is the core of Blood Bowl from a storytelling perspective. In the universe it is set, the game is something that keeps the peace while performing warfare. Any Blood Bowl film should have this core concept in mind because it makes the sporting drama so much more important. A Blood Bowl movie with a good script will be a classic sporting drama. However, the matches will also be as violent as they can because they're sort of keeping the peace. And that this movie, therefore, has a nice philosophical point to balance the storytelling on. So before I pitch it to you, let's talk about what the movie should definitely have to satisfy the fans of the game, the core audience for a movie adaptation. We obviously have to consider budget and expectations of the film. It is, after all, a new story, and a film studio would be taking a chance. The first film has to be simplistic and not requiring too much expenditure. Speaking of which, firstly, the teams. The film should introduce several of the more popular standard teams from the game. Now obviously budget will prevent the film from focusing on all the available teams, but the core ones should be there. Humans, dwarves, elves being the standard, but also orc, goblin, undead, Norse, Amazons and lizardmen. These teams should be varied and different from one another, and if possible, not CGI. Let's go with some really good makeup. It just looks better. The film has to promote the uniqueness of each team and what they bring to the table. Fans will expect the dwarf team to be the sort of jocks of the universe. The Skaven, the most cunning, the goblins the sneakiest, and the undead the toughest and a little crazy. Now the film won't have time to give us the full games on the screen. For the most part, we'll get snippets of outrageous plays by our main team to win the matches, and they'll be shown in a sort of montage. But these plays should demonstrate how one team uses the weaknesses of another to make that outrageous play. Speaking of which, secondly, recreate the moments that Blood Bowl players routinely get in their own games, and sometimes love and sometimes hate. Blood Bowl players and their memes will tell you that there are plays that frequently turn up in a game that should be recreated. They are the essence of the game, not because they are sound tactical considerations, because sometimes they aren't. Instead, they occur because of the fantasy element of the races involved. There would have to be a scene where a troll throws a nobbler over the touchline with the ball. The tree man roots unexpectedly, allowing the opposition to go round them to the tree man's frustration. A gutter runner escapes the scrum and runs to the end zone all in one fluid movement. A Croxagor's tail tackles a stunty player. Players get knocked out. The fans pummel a player who goes off the pitch and then they die. Get these moments in there. It seems chaotic, but it is part of the experience of Blood Bowl. I would say the game manifests more flashy and outrageous plays than conservative ones. Speaking of chaos, the word, not the faction. Thirdly, the film has to capture the unpredictability of the game. Blood Bowl as a game is played with dice that determine action by luck. A good coach will play the percentages and odds and mostly succeed. A crazy coach will play the Hail Mary plays and fail, but sometimes succeed. That has to be in the film somehow. The unpredictable nature has to shine through. So if a Blood Bowl film is made, and it should, how should the story reflect these points and the sport as a whole? It's been a long time since we've had a good old sports film, where a team that's the underdogs tries to make it big, taught by a coach that used to be great and has fallen on hard times. A Blood Bowl film would be a great opportunity to revisit this area of sporting greatness in films. Now I've come up with a sort of draft storyline script? No, it's not a script. It's definitely not a script. Of a Blood Bowl movie, and I want you to comment if you think differently about some of these points, or maybe I'm getting it wrong. That's fine. In some ways, this whole video is about getting all the fans together to talk about this, and for a film studio that wants to make a Blood Bowl film to read all of these comments and go, well, we definitely better do this and not that. So let's get into this draft script. Not a script. Now the film should open with a montage of battles in the Warhammer universe. Maybe the camera pans over a map of the old world. We get snippets of different races fighting. And this cements the idea that this world has a long history of war. This is also an opportunity to show off the Warhammer world to the fans, give them some Easter eggs, and set the scene for the core lore of Blood Bowl. Now, this script presumes there's no other Warhammer film that introduces this world. So, by also having this nice little intro, you get to, show people what the Warhammer world looks like, and that might inspire films from the Warhammer universe, which again, we should definitely do. If possible, have Cate Blanchett do the voiceover.
Much that once was is lost, for none now live who remember it.
As the montage ends, after showing us lots and lengthy battles and timelines, like thousands of years of warfare, we settle on a battlefield of orcs and dwarfs, the same old story. One dwarf, however, gets away from the preparations and leans their back against a ruin to steel his nerves with some drink. The wall collapses, and he tumbles down into an arena buried and in ruins. He stares at the etchings on the wall. He hears more stone collapse, and tumbling down to join him is an orc who leant up against a different wall and tumbled into the same arena. They both stand ready to fight, but as the orc steps forward, a ball, perhaps rolled into his path by an unseen force, ends up at his feet. The orc steps on the ball, trips up, and the ball flies towards the dwarf. The orc sort of pauses the battle, holds up a hand, cursing, nursing his head, and a little embarrassed that he fell. The dwarf pauses and inspects the ball that has now sort of flown across due to the orc tripping and landed at his feet. The orc stares at it too, wondering what had almost failed him and lost him this battle. Neither have seen such a thing like it before. They look around the arena, taking in the stands and the rules etched onto the walls, and finally an image of the god Nuffle, smiling at them from his fresco. The dwarf picks up the ball, examines it closely, and then mimicking a picture on the wall, throws it to the orc. Now the orc, to catch it, drops his weapons to catch it in both hands, and throws it back, imitating again the etching on the wall. The dwarf likewise drops his weapons. This symbolises the peace the game brings. By chucking the ball back and forward, they have to drop their weapons. It's a nice little moment, I think, in the film. A really good show and not tell moment. The pair look at the walls. The scene then sort of fades, transitions to different angles of the arena as more and more orcs and dwarfs arrive inspecting the ruins. The crowd grows. The dwarfs translate and write down the rules, and soon a match starts. Eventually, the generals of the two armies find the commotion. Both armies stop when their superiors march in. It looks like there's going to be a flaming row. Instead, the generals coach from the sidelines, and the battle never happens. And when the dwarves win, the battle is decided and a rematch is proposed with no hard feelings on either side. The orcs and dwarves shake hands on a good game. Cut 2. A match nearing its end, several centuries later, so we say. We focus on our player, the main character. Now, I assume our main character would be human, but it could be of any race and gender really in the Warhammer universe, or in the Blood Bowl universe, I should say. The team fails to win and is kicked out of the tournament. The team breaks up for their failure, and the MC, main character, is distraught, wanting nothing more than to play. We see them try to get on more teams, but they can't. Eventually they are downcast and depressed. Their wife or significant other suggests they try coaching instead, something they are not into, but decide to give it a go. They read that a new team roster is being allowed in the next big tournament in the region. Let's not go global in the Warhammer universe yet, let's keep it regional. It gives way for sequels, which I assume will happen. The new roster is the Underworld Denizens roster. It's put in place by the Commissioner, the aging dwarf who first discovered Blood Bowl. Dwarfs live a long time in the Warhammer universe, so this isn't too out there. In the background of all of this, the audience will be informed that the underworld denizens of this region might return to the old ways of fighting traditional war rather than using Blood Bowl. The old dwarf has put this roster together personally, and for most of the movie this will be interpreted as the dwarves attempting to stoke conflict, hoping that maybe an underworld denizens team would fracture and fight and there cause actual warfare. RMC, desperate to be a part of the sport, starts to form the team as a coach, being unable to play now. For one thing, you don't find many humans in the underworld denizens teams, but he can't be a part of the team himself, so he decides to coach. We get a montage of him gathering the various players, a mixture of goblins, Skaven, gutter runners, trolls and snotlings. They are all rejects from other teams desperate to play for their own reasons. They agree to join the team. A special player will also join, down on their luck. Everyone has their own foibles and character traits. A subplot will run side by side of this, covering cheerleaders for the team, who will be formed by the wife or significant other of the MC, who gathers a motley crew of female cheerleaders from the various races. And for fun, an orc female, even an undead one. Although, I don't know, are orcs fungus in the Warhammer universe? Put your answer in the comments. At some point, this subplot will culminate in a moment where the crowd attempts to punch up a player who has been pushed off the pitch, and the cheerleaders fight back on their behalf, pushing the crowd back. This gives us a fun action sequence of cheerleaders in a punch-up. The coach struggles to turn their team into a working unit. They need a way to bring them together. So he tricks the group into getting into a fight with a chaos team. The fight turns into a match, and the group wins. Now they take their training more seriously. The burgeoning war between the Underworld citizens heats up as the regional tournament begins. The first match is Goblins versus Skaven, the classic Underworld denizens, with both teams using underhand tactics to win, which is not unusual for a bunch of rats and goblins. The Goblin win is a surprise upset, and the tension in the crowd is high. As our team takes to arena for the second game, the Goblins and Skaven in the arena, the onlookers, are angry at them, because they're seeing Skaven and Goblins on the same team. The MC pulls them together, and they win their first match against the Dwarf team, who are the lovable sort of jocks. The Goblin and Skaven audiences, who saw their own teams fight each other and won, are now starting to root for this mixture of Skaven and Goblin. Meanwhile, a subplot is revealed where the Imperial team is run and managed by an Imperial noble. He has been purposely stoking the fires of the Underworld denizens, brewing their war up, hoping to rid his land of the vermin, and tries to sabotage the MC's team. Each match is more difficult than the last, with spectacular plays being made. The Skaven on the team even stop being underhand. The star player starts to bask in adoration of the crowd once more. The troll becomes less stupid and less prone to error. However, the team is forced to take on a journeyman after an injury of another teammate. Roughly at the 3/4 mark of the film, the team's match before the final reveals problems. The star player is showboating, and the team realises that the MC tricked them into banding together. The coach is also desperate to play and benches a player to get back in the game. In order to get the team back together, the MC realises that they shouldn't be playing him anymore. They're better as a coach. And in order to bring the team solidly together once more, he recounts why they are into Blood Bowl. You see, the MC's father once went off to war against the citizens of Khemri. Now, citizens is not the right word to use, because in the Warhammer universe, they're all skeletons who have been raised from the dead by an evil necromancer called Nagash, or Cetra, or etc., etc. The skeletons, basically. And the father was likely to die in this conflict. However, the father took a Blood Bowl ball with him to Khemri and introduced the game to them, and that sort of ended the war. And he came back home alive when he was expected to die. And this is why the MC is into the game. To him, it's serving in a military context, but in the game of football. And he loves that it brings peace, and he just loves playing the game for that reason. It connects him to his father that maybe he's tragically lost. Playing Blood Bowl was the only way the MC could serve like his dad did. Eventually, his wife encourages him to give up on the idea of serving through play, and instead that being a coach is like being a general, and that's how he can serve instead, and he takes that on board. The group realises the anti-war sentiment of the game and how it brings races together, especially the Skaven and the Goblin. Regardless of the fact that they were tricked into being a team by playing a Chaos team, doesn't matter to them, and they realise that what they're doing is important. And the Skaven and Goblin members of the team actually discuss with each other how they don't want the war at all. They like the peace, despite the nature of Skaven and Goblins, I guess. Well, the fantasy nature of them, anyway. The MC apologises for tricking them, but reminds the team that they love the game too, for the exact reasons he does. The star player also realises that the game is not about them and tones down their actions to play properly. Against the Lizard Man team that they've been playing, they win, and on to the final against the Imperials. Things have come to a head. The aging dwarf commissioner from the very beginning of the movie is there, with a beard that trails down the steps. In the Warhammer universe, dwarves don't trim their beards as they age. It's actually a sign of dishonour. So, this is something that you should definitely pay attention to what you expect from the culture of the Warhammer world and include it in the film, okay? This also separates it from other fantasy universes. Anyway, the commissioner is there, and it turns out that the manager, the noble of the Imperial team, has one last tactic to play to help his team win. They have inserted a spy into the overall team, the journeyman, who replaced an injured player. And he gets the spy to throw the match and make sure they are shown to do just that, hopefully causing division in the team and therefore division off the pitch too. Maybe if this Goblin Skaven team fractures, the Goblins and Skaven watching this tournament will fracture too, and the Imperial gets his war. However, as the game goes poorly thanks to the teammate, Nuffle itself reveals themselves to the MC and warns him of the journeyman. Nuffle prizes his dedication to the game that meant so much to the world. The main character casts out the spy, maybe even fighting in the dugout as a result. So we get a nice little punch-up scene in the dugout for you. Maybe, I think actually it should, the team are actually left one player short, adding even more drama to this final against the Imperials. The game continues and the Underworld denizens pull it out of the bag and win as a team, with a star player maybe handing off the ball to a Nobbler, who is ignored by the Imperials, who gets the winning goal, defeating the Imperials. But that's actually a bit cliche, isn't it, for the star to pass it to the lesser known player who gets the main goal? That's actually too cliche. Maybe we should avoid that. But I kind of want to see it. What do you think? Put it in the comments. After winning the regional tournament, the situation with the Skaven and Goblins dies down. The Commissioner meets with the MC and tells him his dad would be proud of him. He also infers that he added the roster of the Underworld denizens in order to foster peace, which is what he and his orc friend discovered in that arena, and thank Nuffle, it worked. Or something like that. That's the end of the movie, basically. I think it's a nice ending. What do you think? How could the script be improved? What plays should be showcased? I could imagine a funny scene where the dwarves bring on their giant tank thing, so a goblin called Dribblesnot pulls out a bomb and blows it up. Maybe the troll is standing next to the goblin who has the ball. Everyone is screaming at him to grab the goblin and chuck him as the opposition barrels towards him. There's a storm overhead and a lightning strike hits the troll, supercharges its brain, and he picks the goblin up, and across the scene we see calculations as the troll throws the goblin into a soft puddle at the end zone and the goblin slides to victory. Maybe our team is playing the undead and beating them quite easily, however they keep regenerating. Then one of our team, the MC's team, is killed, but is resurrected to join the undead one, and now they have to play against their teammate. They win, and the undead now undead teammate joyfully joins the undead team as a sign of sportsmanship. Talking of sequels, seamless segue, the next film would involve the addition of more rosters and our team goes to the big leagues. That plot would centre around the lesser known teams taking part, with a background nemesis who doesn't want these teams here and tries to sabotage the new games and prevent them from playing ever again. A note on sequels, in this first film, don't kill off an important player. Just seriously injure them. Save a true death for the sequel, which galvanises the team to play harder. Talking of a trilogy, again, seamless segue, the final film could be the Chaos Gods entering a bunch of teams into a big tournament with the intention of gaining additional worship through their teams, hoping to win and restart wars and get worship from Nuffle. The final match is literally going to open another warp gate if the Chaos team wins. Now, a warp gate in the Warhammer universe is very bad. It's basically where hell spills out from, and there's no Doomslayer to help you defeat it. This could end up with the fans of everyone who isn't Chaos cheering Nuffle on as the Chaos Gods and Nuffle fight it out over the game, like in the sky or something, as the game plays beneath them. There you go. I think that's how you put a Blood Bowl film together on the big screen. Don't do a series, do a film. I think it just works better. Please comment on your own ideas, I want to hear them. What other storytelling elements could be added to properly showcase Blood Bowl to the audience? What should the coach monologue be to get them playing? What are some quotable lines? Please like and subscribe and stay tuned for the next Game to Movie. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.